Japan tells a very clean story about itself. One people, one land, one unbroken bloodline stretching back thousands of years. That story is taught in schools. It's celebrated in national holidays. It's woven into Japanese identity at the deepest level. But in 2021, a team of scientists from Kanazawa University, Harvard, and the Max Planck Institute published a study in the journal Science Advances that quietly broke that story apart. Their conclusion? Modern Japanese people are not descended from one ancient population, or even two. They come from three completely separate groups, three ancient peoples, who arrived at different times from different places, carrying completely different DNA. Three groups whose stories were never told together, until now. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. The physical proof, the bones, the tombs, in the burial chambers, that could answer every question about who really built Japan. Those are sealed, locked, protected by Japanese imperial law. No scientist on Earth has been allowed inside. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now. Where in the world are you watching from? And have you ever taken a DNA ancestry test? What did it show you? Let us know below, because by the end of this video, you might want to take one. Because the question we're really asking today isn't just about Japan. It's about what happens when a nation's DNA tells a completely different story than its history books, and what gets buried, literally, to keep that story from coming out. It starts 30,000 years ago, with a people whose name most of the world has never heard. Their name was the Jomon, and what happened to them is one of the most quietly devastating stories in all of human history. The Jomon were already here. Long before Japan had an emperor, a flag, or a name, these people were living on these islands. They arrived approximately 30,000 years ago, and they stayed, undisturbed, uncontacted, for over 14,000 years. That's not a small amount of time. To put it in perspective, that's longer than ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, and the entire history of Christianity, combined. And they weren't primitive, not even close. The Jomon made pottery. Not just any pottery, the oldest fired clay pottery ever found anywhere on Earth, dated to roughly 16,500 years ago. Scientists confirmed this. They built permanent structures. They maintained trade networks across the islands. And they buried their dead with jade ornaments and sacred dog companions, which tells us they had organized spiritual beliefs. Now here's the genetic part. And pay attention, because this is where it gets really interesting. In 2021, researchers analyzed DNA from ancient Jomon skeletons spanning 8,000 years of history. What they found shocked them. The Jomon genome sat completely outside all other East Asian genetic lineages. Not slightly different, completely separate, like a tree branch that split off from the rest of the world between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago, right when rising sea levels cut Japan off from the Asian continent. And the Jomon men, they carried a Y chromosome marker called D1b, a paternal lineage found almost nowhere else on Earth outside Japan. A genetic fingerprint that says, we were here first, and we were here alone. Their population stayed remarkably small, around 1,000 people in the earliest periods, slowly growing over thousands of years. For all 14,000 years of their isolation, their DNA barely changed. Same genome, same markers. From the north of the islands to the south, generation after generation. That kind of genetic stability only happens when a population is truly isolated. They had no contact with the outside world. Until one day, boats appeared on the horizon, and the world the Jomon had known for 14,000 years was about to end. Around 900 BCE, a new group arrived on the Japanese islands. History books call this the Yayoi period. They call it a cultural transition, an exchange of ideas, the introduction of rice farming. But the DNA tells a different story. And these new arrivals, called the Yayoi, came from the Korean peninsula and coastal northeastern China. They brought wet rice agriculture, bronze tools, and a genome fundamentally different from anything the Jomon carried. Scientists modeled the genetics. The result was brutal in its clarity. According to a 2023 study in the journal Cell Reports, modern mainland Japanese people carry approximately 83% continental ancestry and only about 17% Jomon ancestry. Let that number sit for a moment. a people who survived on these islands for 14,000 years, genetically reduced to a footnote in less than 1,000. And the Science Advances study by Cook and colleagues confirmed something the history books never say out loud. The Jomon population didn't gradually blend with the Yayoi. Their genetic contribution collapsed sharply. It's the kind of collapse scientists associate with population displacement, disease, or outright demographic replacement. This wasn't a trade exchange. This was a takeover. And the Jomon, who had no word for invasion because they'd never seen one, were pushed to the edges. North to Hokkaido, south to the Ryukyu Islands. The exact places, by the way, where the highest concentrations of Jomon DNA still survive today. But here is what nobody in Japan's school system tells you. The Yayoi weren't the last wave. Centuries later, another group arrived. And this group didn't just bring farming, they brought armies, political power, and possibly the ancestors of Japan's imperial family itself. Around 250 CE, something changed in Japan. New people arrived from the continent, different from the Yayoi, carrying a genome that pointed to populations near the ancient Korean Baekje Kingdom and northern China's Yellow River Basin. This was the beginning of the Kofun period. The Science Advances study confirmed it. These Kofun migrants introduced a third ancestral layer into the Japanese genome, genetically distinct from both the Jomon and the Yayoi. And here's the part that's hardest to ignore. The 3 Kofun individuals whose DNA was sequenced in that 2021 study were genetically almost indistinguishable from modern mainland Japanese people today. Think about what that means. The genetic profile of Japan as we know it today was essentially locked in during the Kofun period. That's when the 3 ancestral streams, Jomon, Yayoi, and Kofun, merged into the people we now call Japanese. And here's the twist that Japanese officialdom would prefer you don't think about too long. The Kofun period is the exact same period when Japan's imperial dynasty was established. The imperial family, claimed to stretch back 2,600 unbroken years, traces its political origins to this precise moment, a moment when continental migrants from Korea and China arrived and restructured Japanese society from the top down. The artifacts found near Kofun burial sites confirm the foreign connection: Chinese bronze mirrors, Korean iron, imported continental craftsmanship. The material culture of the ruling class was foreign, and the DNA of the people who came with that culture also foreign. But here's what no scientist can verify. Because the tombs, the keyhole-shaped burial mounds where Japan's earliest emperors supposedly rest, have never been scientifically excavated. And the reason why is one of the most quietly extraordinary stories in modern archaeology. Japan has over 160,000 burial mounds scattered across the country. Their size was determined by the rank of the person buried inside. The largest ones were built for emperors. The biggest of them all, the Daisen Kofun, said to be the tomb of Emperor Nintoku, is 486 meters long, larger in base area than the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it has never been fully excavated, not because archaeologists don't want to, they do. Desperately. Because the Imperial Household Agency, a branch of the Japanese government, legally controls 188 designated imperial tombs across the country, and they do not allow scientific access. In 2018, a limited survey was permitted, but only around the outer moat. Not the burial chamber, not the bones, not the DNA. When UNESCO designated the Mozu Furuichi Kofun Group as a World Heritage Site in 2019, archaeologists pointed out the obvious irony. Japan was asking the world to celebrate these sites while simultaneously blocking the science that could tell us what's actually inside them. The Independent reported in 2017 that archaeologists believe these tombs may hold an embarrassing secret, that the earliest emperors were not of divine Japanese origin, but continental migrants. One historian, quoted anonymously, said it plainly: "We already know what the DNA will likely show. That is precisely why we are not allowed to look." The tombs stay sealed, but the DNA of 125 million living Japanese people has already been read, and it doesn't look the same everywhere. What it looks like in the south, in Okinawa, quietly destroys the national narrative all over again. If you drew a map of Jomon DNA across Japan, it would look like this. In mainland Honshu, the political heart of Japan, Jomon ancestry sits at roughly 12 to 15%. Travel south to Okinawa, and that number nearly doubles. A 2023 study confirmed that southern Ryukyu island populations carry approximately 26 to 36% Jomon ancestry, and in certain Hokkaido subpopulations in the north, among people with Ainu ancestry, it climbs above 31%. The further you move from Japan's political center, the more ancient the DNA becomes. In Okinawa, the story goes deeper. See, the Ryukyuan people maintained an entirely separate kingdom until 1879. Their own language, their own religious traditions, their own female spiritual leaders called Noro priestesses, and a genome that science now classifies as distinctly different from mainland Japanese. The same 2023 study confirmed that Ryukyuans cluster genetically closer to the Ainu of Hokkaido than to mainland Japanese, two island-edge populations at opposite ends of the archipelago, united by the same ancient Jomon blood. Japan forcibly absorbed the Ryukyu kingdom in 1879, banned the Ryukyuan language in schools, tried to fold these people into one national identity. But you cannot erase a genome, and the genome of Okinawa's people says, "We were here before you called this country Japan." But if Ryukyuans carry ancient DNA, who carries even more of it? The answer is a people that Japan spent 150 years trying to make disappear. In the north of Japan, on the island of Hokkaido, lives a people called the Ainu. Their language has no known relatives anywhere on Earth. Not in Asia, not in Siberia, nowhere. Their physical features, deep-set eyes, wavy hair, full beards on the men, look strikingly different from mainland Japanese. Different enough that anthropologists debated their origins for over a century. DNA has now answered that debate. A 2017 study published through the National Institutes of Health confirmed direct genetic continuity between the ancient Hokkaido Jomon people and the modern Ainu. The Y chromosome marker D1b, the ancient Jomon paternal signature, is found at high frequency in Ainu men today. The Ainu are not a mystery. They are the direct biological descendants of Japan's original people, and Japan spent 150 years trying to erase them. In the Meiji era, the Japanese government classified the Ainu as Kyūdojin, former Aborigines, a legal status that denied them land rights, cultural protections, and recognition. Their language was banned. Their children were forced into Japanese schools. Their sacred lands were redistributed to settlers. That law was only repealed in 2019. But during the suppression years, the Ainu did something extraordinary. They performed their most sacred ritual, the Iomante bear ceremony, thousands of years old, in secret, hidden from authorities, passed from elders to children in private, a living act of resistance that kept an ancient tradition alive when the state was trying to kill it. And then, in 2024, a study from Kanazawa University, analyzing data from over 170,000 Japanese participants, confirmed that Jomon ancestry is still functionally shaping the bodies of living people today. It influences BMI. It affects immune variation. It leaves measurable marks in the biology of descendants who may not even know they carry it. 10,000-year-old DNA, still active, still present, still speaking. But deep inside that ancient genome, scientists found something they were completely unprepared for, a signal from a species that went extinct 30,000 years ago. In 2010, a team led by geneticist Svante Pääbo at the Max Planck Institute made one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of science. They sequenced the genome of the Denisovans, a species known only from a finger bone, a jawbone, a handful of teeth, found in a cave in Siberia. A ghost species of humans who walked the earth alongside our ancestors and then vanished. And in the DNA of living people today, Pääbo's team found traces of Denisovan ancestry, proof that our ancestors and the Denisovans had interbred tens of thousands of years ago. That discovery won Pääbo the Nobel Prize in Physiology in 2022, and it raised a very specific question about Japan. How much Denisovan DNA do Japanese people carry? In November 2025, a study in Current Biology, co-authored by Stefan Pireña of the Max Planck Institute, delivered a finding that reordered the entire conversation. The Jomon, Japan's oldest people isolated for 14,000 years, carried surprisingly little Denisovan DNA. But the Kofun period migrants, The Continental group, who arrived in 250 CE and built Japan's political structure, carried more of it. The archaic human signal didn't come from Japan's deep ancient past. It came from the continent, brought in by the people who built the empire. As Perenya noted, Denisovan DNA represents a powerful marker to reconstruct population history. And in Japan, it's pointing somewhere that no existing map can yet follow. A species with no name, no culture, no monuments, quietly shaping the immune systems of people living in Tokyo today. But the Denisovan signal isn't the only biological mystery in Japanese DNA. There is a physical trait in this population, traceable directly to the Jomon, that has no parallel in any neighboring country. And scientists are still working out what it means. Consider the ABCC11 gene. It controls earwax type, wet or dry. Sounds trivial. But a study in the Journal of Human Genetics, led by Sato and colleagues in 2009, found that this gene variant exists at frequencies in Jomon-descended populations that are measurably different from all surrounding East Asian populations. It's a molecular fingerprint, still present, still heritable, still dividing people in a country that insists it has no ancient divisions. And there's a bigger pattern here. The 2024 study from Osaka University, using data from over 170,000 Japanese participants through the Biobank Japan project, identified 132 specific genetic variants that trace directly to Jomon ancestry. These variants influence body weight, immune response, cellular function in muscle tissue, and they've been under natural selection, meaning something about them has been worth keeping, generation after generation. When people in modern Japan are walking around with biological traits shaped by hunter-gatherers who lived on these islands over 10,000 years ago. The Jomon didn't disappear. They became the hidden biology of a civilization that tells itself it came from somewhere else. But there is one final layer to this story, one that scientists found and then quietly set aside because they didn't know what to do with it. A signal in the Jomon genome, pointing not east or west, but across the Pacific. This is the part that science has not resolved. Population genomic studies, connected to teams at Harvard and the Max Planck Institute, have detected a statistically significant genetic affinity between Jomon-related populations and certain indigenous peoples of the Amazon basin in South America. This is not speculation, and it appears in peer-reviewed research, and it has no agreed-upon explanation. Two peoples, the world's largest ocean between them, no shared written history, no known contact, no migration route anyone has successfully mapped, and yet the same ancient signal in both genomes. The theories range from a lost Pacific crossing to a shared ancestral population that once seeded both East Asia and parts of the Americas, a population whose trail has been erased by time. Science has no consensus. But here is what that finding does to the story we started with. Japan told you it was one people, one bloodline, pure, continuous, unbroken. The genome says something completely different. It says Japan was built by people who survived 14,000 years of isolation and were then genetically overtaken by wave after wave of continental migrants. Or it says the ancestors of Japan's ruling class almost certainly came from Korea and China, and the tombs that could prove it are still sealed by imperial decree. It says the people carrying the most ancient Japanese DNA, the Ainu and the Ryukyuans, spent 150 years being erased by the very nation whose genetic foundation they literally are. And it says that buried somewhere in the oldest layer of this genome, in the blood of the Jomon, in the people the world forgot, is a thread that runs not just across Asia, but possibly to the other side of the world. The tombs are sealed, the textbooks are silent, but the genome never lies, and it still has far more to say. If this made you question what you thought you knew, the next story goes even deeper. Subscribe, turn on notifications. Because the next genetic secret is already waiting.